Hello, everyone. I'm Wendy Liebman, CEO and Chief Shopper at WSL Strategic Retail, and this is Future Shop. This is where I talk to innovators, disruptors, and iconoclasts about the future of retail. Today, the topic is how to create a modern customer experience at retail, or should I say in WSL speak, a modern shopper experience. I mean, those of you who hang out with me here on a regular basis know that I am absolutely obsessed with the idea of how do we need to think about building a modern retail culture in this country, but actually, why not, all around the world? And that's what we're going to talk about today. My guest is Justin Lafoe. He was most recently Executive Vice President of Marketing and Merchandising for Trader Joe's. And prior to that, when I met him, he worked for the Walt Disney Company for over 25 years, starting as a small boy, as a frontline cast member. I never asked him. Maybe he was dressed up as Mickey. I don't know. You'll tell me that in a minute, Justin. And ultimately, he was Senior Vice President of Merchandising and Retail, where he led the teams responsible for merchandising, retail commercial efforts at everything from the Disney parks and resorts to the cruise lines, to the stores, to .com. He was instrumental in transforming the physical retail flagship destinations around the world in Hong Kong and Shanghai and Tokyo and Disneyland in Paris. So, I mean, an extraordinary career, which continues. But who better to talk to about delivering a modern, magical customer, shopper experience than Justin? Well, welcome, Justin, to Future Shop.
Hi, Wendy. It's so wonderful to see you. I'm absolutely obsessed with you, so it's great to be here with you today. And I did start all those years ago in an interesting role at Disney. I was a doorman at a hotel. That was my first gig.
You know, I was thinking about the first time we met, and I think it was when I was asked to come down and make a speech at Disney in that auditorium. And I think it was around the 2008 recession.
That's true. Yeah.
And I don't know about other people. You know, this is the Disney experience world. I got up there. I don't have the best voice in the world. And all of a sudden, I'm singing the Mickey Mouse Club song. I do not know where that came from.
I think it was the mouse ears that we put on your head with your name on it that probably did that to you. So look out.
I think about all the work we did together and, you know, the thinking about reimagining downtown Disney and then the localization work around, you know, appealing to the Hispanic guests from Brazil or Mexico and all the flagship work. And, you know, I mean, Disney is clearly recognized as a company that understands building customer experience. So when you think about delivering a modern, relevant, I'm going to say, customer experience at retail today, I mean, so much has changed.
Sure.
World, digital, COVID, all of that. You know, how do we need to think about that? How do you think about it today?
You know, first, I think you have to really get a common language and define what modern is in this context, because retail is changing so rapidly, like you mentioned. Obviously, technology is a huge factor and the thing that we spend the most time talking about, I think, and how it's affecting retail. But I think even bigger than that is the major generational lifestyle shifts that are happening to the customer, the consumer, and that was all accelerated during COVID. The heart of this question is really the existential challenge that I think most retailers are facing: how to keep their products and experiences relevant and to keep pace with technology and these ever-changing lifestyles. And I think to deliver a modern retail experience, the retailer has to be an expert in technology. Again, that's almost a given, but even more so in their customer. And I think that's a little lesson you taught me all those years ago. On the customer side of the equation, I think the most important thing to keep your eye on is these major trends that are affecting the generational shifts with millennials, Gen Zs, alphas, who are becoming the primary shoppers, and they're shopping with their values more than anything. So I think that values piece is going to come up a lot as we talk today.
Yeah.
But I also think there's a big piece that gets lost in the shuffle, and that is the employee experience. And so when I think about the customer, I think even more so about the employee and what the employee's buy-in is in the culture and the experience of it and what we're doing to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
So you have to have as much energy focused on creating that cultural foundation for your employees.
That's so interesting to me because I think about we just were in on a trip we took 20 of our nearest and dearest to on one of our retail safaris to visit one of the retailers in the Midwest, in the retailer Hy-Vee, and their employees were so engaged, so happy to see you, and you felt like that notion of sort of coming home. And I was struck also because we recently in like an REI store, where that whole experience of sort of being part of the co-op and the community is so important. So I'm really that notion of those constituencies of both the consumer, customer, shopper, whatever guest, whatever we want to call them, and the people who serve them is the other piece it's so powerful. How do you see that today when you think about what do we need to do to bring those two groups together, the consumer and the employee?
Well, let me first come clean about something. I am a strong believer in the physical retail experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think everything's going to center around the place that you're creating, and guess what? It's not digital. I spent most of my time at Disney creating these places where brand and storytelling set the stage for compelling and innovative products that were enhanced by exceptional customer service. And so I think that that's the heart of what retailers need to be concentrating on. In essence, this is where all those constituents are present: the customer, the employee, the brand coming alive to tell a story and fulfill a need or a want. And I really believe firmly that the next generation of retailers, the ones that kind of survive this digital Amazon post-mall apocalypse, will be the ones who figure out how to deliver a truly immersive and authentic brand experience in a physical space. Places that are enhanced by technology, but not overburdened by technology that doesn't really solve a shopper's problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we get really fixated on the latest buzzworthy technologies in stores, and that's all they are. They're buzzworthy. They become a maintenance nightmare, and they're not solving a shopper's problems. Where I think it goes wrong, where retailers have kind of overreached, is really this last decade of channel blurring, where brands are trying to reach everyone, everywhere, all the time to drive that year-over-year growth. And in doing that, they lose their way. They dilute the experience and thus the power of their brands and products by putting way too much emphasis on digital and direct to consumer.
So that would say, how do I, as a retailer, or more importantly, as a brand, become more selective about where I sell my goods and services? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And it's resisting the temptation for driving those year-over-year comps based on more stores. I had the fortune to work for two companies who are primarily physical retail destinations, Disney, as we've been talking about, but also Trader Joe's, who believes very strongly in the in-store experience. And as you notice, still doesn't have Instacart, as part of what they're doing, because the store, the place, is where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And I think the employees and their buy-in are what makes that special for the customer experience.
Yeah. I think that was interesting during the pandemic. I must say that, for us personally and our family, going to the grocery store, personally going to the grocery store was, where we got to talk to people, where we got to spend time, where, it was that sort of, laying on of hands, since we weren't doing it in that, but it was that personal engagement. And it really did reinforce to me even more that digital is fine and efficient, and I get things off my list and I can do a lot of homework and all of those things. But when I want to really think about that overarching experience where I walk away and say, that's a place I want to go back to again, and not just go riff off somewhere else, that's very compelling to me. The thing that it also made me think about was, the discussion, the back and forth a lot about the Disney magic bands. And it was like, oh no, too much technology. No, that's not us. But of course it was a solution and it facilitated the experience. So it worked, right?
Yeah, and that was about really understanding individuals and what their tastes and preferences are. And so while technology enabled it, it was at the heart of it, it was really solving a problem the guest had.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that strikes me in all of this is that, we've seen of the last few years, not to trash anybody, but these sort of icons, retail icons of experience who are now struggling. I think about Starbucks a lot because that notion of third place
Yeah.
and the place that you would sort of go into at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you'd smell the great coffee and you'd hear the jazz or whatever. And you'd, stand in line for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes and maybe sit on a couch or whatever. It was a very immersive experience. And then it became very commoditized.
Yeah, I think unfortunately for Starbucks, that's probably a great example of about what we're speaking to. And my take, having only experienced Starbucks as a customer, by the way, a very frequent customer, is that COVID rapidly accelerated some of these things that were already going on to their stores in the background. You mentioned third place, right? Howard Schultz coined the phrase, and it really made sense to me. It was a place that you wanted to be. And unfortunately, it feels like Starbucks is a barely recognizable version of itself today.
Yeah.
And long gone are those days when you wanted to visit the store, spend hours talking with your friends, studying for a test, and drinking 2 or 3 handcrafted beverages. But they were able to capture this essence because of that in-store experience, because you were immersed in coffee. You could smell, taste, listen to the music, and feel the vibe. And I think that has obviously changed. Starbucks now feels completely transactional, from a destination standpoint, which is far from their roots. I think those lifelines during COVID, which were their mobile app and the drive-through, were probably absolutely critical for their survival at that time. But they've made going into the lobby, going into the store, a completely irrelevant experience.
Yeah.
They've replaced that with the ability for convenience and then the commoditization of their product. And I think that's very dangerous for brands, and you may achieve your year over year growth, but you're losing something along the way.
Yeah, it's very interesting you say that because I was thinking about you the other day. A friend of mine who lives the other side of town, Manhattan, said she hadn't been out walking all day. And I said, well, where are you? She said, well, I decided to walk to Trader Joe's, which is the other side near me. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, I needed a destination, but I also needed a happy destination, to my list. But I'd been locked at the desk and the computer all day. I needed to walk in and see interesting things and product and people being kind of strange and, those sort of things. And I thought about that in that context of that very clear definition of what the place is that you're talking about, the value of physical retail in that place.
Yeah, retail at its very best is about community.
Mm-hmm.
It's the place where you go to be entertained, to hear a story, to experience products. It's a sensory journey. And I think, again, when retailers get it right, you see it.
You've had the luxury, the whatever, the life of working in a destination where people save up their money and come,
Mm-hmm.
and in an everyday place where people need groceries and feeding the family for dinner and getting stuff off their list. What did you learn at Disney and at not Trade Secrets and at Trader Joe's about that level of how do I engage the everyday customer who walks or guest who walks in the door?
So many learnings over the years. And I think the guiding principle for me was always how you move up kind of that hierarchy of needs, how you go from transactional to this truly immersive experiential, transformational type of experience. And by no means is it one size fits all. You have to understand the customer's motivation and what they need at the moment. And knowing who the convenience shopper is, who wants to just get in and out, and who is looking for removing friction and barriers to their shopping experience. And you do that through large scale format retail locations that can handle a lot of people. And then you might have people who want high levels of service and they want to really spend time with a sales associate and talk about the product and understand the features and benefits of the product. And you want to pull them off to the side and you want a quieter environment. You want a more relaxing environment where they can take the time to deliberate about the products. And then you might have places, some of the things that I got to work on at Disney that I was most proud of, where you completely blur the lines between a traditional store and what entertainment is, and create a space or a place that you don't even realize you're in a store. And I think that's what Disney did so successfully with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, when you can create a $250 lightsaber, by the way, two of them behind me, and never go to a cash register to pay for it. You know, you're working with a cast member who's delivering a storyline, and you're so excited and attached to that product. So I think that it's not a one size fits all proposition by any means, but understanding, you know, who your customer is and meeting them where they are at that moment, whether it's fast and get out or spend some time and really immerse themselves in the story.
You know, what's also intriguing about that is that I think about, you know, when you walk into, you know, many, you know, big box retailers now, or any, you know, small, that you can scan and go, or you can check out at a register. So now I can make the choice for myself as to which I do. But that by itself is a way of
Yep.
designating who I am at the moment, right? And then I can, as a retailer, if I'm sensitive to that, I know that, right? I know they're in a hurry, make sure they got the bags, make sure they can get out, or the person
Yep.
who's coming to talk to me. So that by itself is a sort of a flag that we can respond to as retail people or brand people.
You're absolutely right. Choice is at the heart of that. And I think about how resistant I was initially to self-checkout. You know, I felt like it was transparent to me that the retailer was doing something to manage their labor differently. Now, as a customer, I'm almost annoyed if I have to stand in line, you know, and have a cashier check me out. So I think that choice just becomes a hygiene factor over time, just expected.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned this earlier on about thinking, know who your customer is, know who the shopper is in all of this. And you mentioned values. And I've been
Mhm.
thinking a lot about that in that experience. When you think about, I think about Target's issues and Anheuser-Busch's and Disney's issues and Nike, you know, how do I create a place that stands for something, and how far do I stand for it?
Oh, I think about how hard it is for any company to kind of navigate these waters today. And the examples that you just mentioned, um, we did see this on full display in the last year when it comes to LGBTQ plus topics.
Mhm.
And yes, I was there at Disney and had a bit of a front row seat to what was going on and playing out in the last year or so as an out senior executive who led our Prideberg. Um, I think that the conversations and the perspectives are rapidly evolving, and retail brands or any brand need to continue to be crystal clear on what their core values are, and making sure, most importantly, that their words and actions and their products and services are completely aligned with those values, and that they're essentially walking the talk. And I think where some brands got in trouble in this last year is when they started to backpedal too much because they were trying to please all the constituencies, and that's dangerous.
So, you know, really important when we think about building engagement, loyalty, if that's even a word these days, and building a customer experience where people trust you in delivering that experience.
Retailers start out pure, right? Particularly if they're a startup brands and when they have a really clear vision and really clear mission and their core values are clear, they go out and they hire new talented people who are completely aligned with those values and hungry to pursue those goals. That's in its purest form, right? But I think legacy companies, well, it's a little trickier for them, and you know, staying in touch with your customer is the most important piece, as we've been talking about, knowing who your customers are and meeting them where they are. And there's so many ways you can do that now, particularly, of course, with social media. It provides an instant window in and an instant feedback loop back for everything that's going on. But the real challenge is, what do you do with all these insights? You know, you can have all this data, mountains and mountains of data, but if you don't know how to synthesize it into your products, your customers, your employee experiences, then you find yourself overreacting to everything that comes your way and straying further and further from your core values.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is just a product of the polarization that is going on in society. It's making it almost impossible for retailers and brands to articulate a consistent set of core values that is going to please all of their customers, right? So to stay in touch, I think it's critical to invest in those data and analytics capabilities to keep a pulse on things. But don't forget the human touch, have a mechanism to interpret that data. And sometimes it's as simple as observation, spending time in your operation, talking to the employees, talking to the customers, and understanding what their experience is. I'm convinced that if any CEO actually called their 800 number for any of their businesses and went through their phone tree and experienced what you experienced trying to get through to any of these big companies, things would change.
Yeah.
But I bet they don't experience their own service like that.
Yeah. I think about that a lot, because when we do our retail safaris and immersions, one of the things we do at the very beginning is often give the teams a homework assignment. And the homework assignment is actually gets them to remember that they too are shoppers, and they are real people with everyday needs, and that as shoppers, they wouldn't put up with some of the, excuse the expression, crap that they deliver to their shoppers.
Yeah.
when they're exactly what you're saying now, which I think is really interesting. So our view of always, get out of the office, virtual or real, and get onto the selling floor wherever that happens to be. That also sparked in me, you have an extraordinary global view to how you take a brand and products around the world. And I wonder about that a lot in terms of translating a brand across the globe, where you think about the cultural differences in China and France, US, all of those things. And what you've learned from that as you then have to deliver the kind of essence of a brand in other cultures, whether it's across the country, to your point about division, or whether it's across the world.
I've been very fortunate to work for a company like Disney, who has put me on assignments all over the world, and I've worked on a lot of these great projects. And I think it has given me some great insights. One of the things I used to like to say, because we would go into another country, we'd be working with another team's local team, and they would tell us how different everything is. Everything's different here in this country. And the truth is, although nobody wants to hear it, the world of retail is pretty flat. It is pretty flat. People have two arms that go in a shirt, and they when it comes to the basics of retail, whether it's home goods, fashion, apparel, accessories, cosmetics, you've got these big brands that are so present in all markets that it's starting to feel the same. And but I think it's important to actually represent regional, cultural, and of course seasonal differences and how you translate a portion of your product locally. And that may be how you curate your product, how you buy your product, or how you design your product. One aha moment I had at Disney was after spending a lot of time in our Asia parks, in Disney's Asia parks, I started noticing how big Lunar New Year celebration was, or Chinese New Year. And I started making me think about, the Asian population in the United States is one of the fastest growing populations. And yet we weren't doing anything to service this important cultural moment in the United States. And so over the course of many years, we started pivoting and started adding this to our January, February celebrations in the parks. But to do it right, we actually went back to Hong Kong, to Shanghai, and worked with those design teams to make sure that we were fully leveraging what they were already doing and not creating another US version of this for our Asian guests in the US. And I think that was a big learning, for me. And the number of times that I saw these things translate in both directions, but also made sure that they were culturally relevant and authentic, it was pretty special.
That is, that's such you're right, aha moment, because you think about this country and the diversity. I think about the work we did with Disney, and we were looking at Hispanic guests, and different in California than they were from in Orlando, because where they came from. and the sort of sensibility that says whether I've got 8,000 drugstores or grocery stores or big box retailers of some form, the ability to understand that and take that learning to make that place feel very special and a place that recognizes me and my culture, even in one country like America, is a very powerful learning and insight, I think, in building that kind of engagement and experience.
Yeah, the immutable truth is that a brand like Disney has to be themselves wherever they go, right? In the sense of those core values, their customer experience they want to create, their products, their storytelling. So, they're going to deliver Mickey everywhere, but there also has to be that wiggle room for how you deliver those products and services, how you localize that into those different cultures, and how you expand the portfolio to be culturally relevant. So it is a fine balance, I think.
The other thing I think about, like this is sort of where you started, and I think it's a really valuable way to think about the ending, is how do you think about the quote unquote cast members, the employees? Is it a hiring practice that says in order to deliver a customer experience that feels true, I need to hire people? I mean, I need to have different kind of criteria for hiring as opposed to I just need a body in the store. Easier said than done these days.
My experience with Disney, obviously very well known for the Disney look and the parameters that we put around the type of cast members that were hired, how I was hired in the 90s. But that has to evolve. It has to change. It has to remain relevant. And I think what's more important is for employers, retailers, to create environments where people can bring their authentic selves to work. And trying to fit the mold of what the ideal employee, cast member, crew member might be is tricky. Today people are individuals, and as I mentioned, the shifting lifestyle changes of millennials, Gen Zs, and alphas, who are not only making up the future customer base but the future employee base. We have to be in tune with that. So I think going back to that cultural piece, creating the right cultural environment is everything, to do with the survival and relevancy of a brand. And because you have to have the buy-in of the employees who are going to deliver that customer service or that product.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is that, and you've talked about that a lot over time as we've sort of grown together, that notion of all the constituents, the customer, the guest, and the people who work there representing the values of the brand and being able to create that experience that feels very true. This is really the secret sauce today, right? To mesh the two together that says, this is what makes this place different. And this is why I want to be in this physical place, which you and I strongly believe remains the future of retail in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, just think about during COVID, right? There was so much energy, and even now talking about work from home and the anguish that employers are going through right now, getting people to return to campus.
Mm-hmm.
The retail employees in stores were largely there the whole time, and they were holding the culture together, holding the experience together for the customer. And I think if we spent more time talking about the in-office experience, the campus experience for the employees, and invested in that experience, built that cultural base up again, we wouldn't be having this conversation about return to office. People would be going back because they want the community. They want to be part of something.
Yeah. Yeah, as a last thought on that one, in our Des Moines adventure, we went to a wonderful place which was called the Western Salvage, and it was a salvage warehouse where they took, architectural salvage and repurposed and whatever. But when you walked into the store, this was not IV, separate. When you walked into the store, the first thing you saw was a large coffee seating area. You could also get a drink at night, but there sitting in the corner was a knitting circle. There on the other corner was a group of friends catching up on the day. There was a group of us hanging around. I mean, it was before you even got to the shopping part and buying a piece of furniture or something. There was this, you just wanted to be part of it, right? You just Wow, this
That's
was a big
cool.
fear of missing out if I wasn't in the knitting circle or something. It was incredibly cool. Somebody was having a wedding there. Then I mean, it was just one of these places you could just smell. You could smell the retail. I mean that in a really positive, embracing way. That you just it was the best of all of things, and I would never have expected to have seen that in Western Salvage or whatever it was called. So anyway,
Sounds perfect.
yeah,
Sounds perfect.
now I get it. So let me ask you a last question. Best
Okay.
retail experience as a shopper, worst retail experience as a shopper? Am I putting you on the spot?
Well, maybe I need to go to Des Moines, Iowa, I guess.
Not this week. Not this week.
Not this week. Okay. Well, I thought a lot about this one, and I've got to say, I really like what Camp has done. Their name has been out there for a while, but when you think about what they've been doing, right, they found a way to deliver a physical retail experience that has this educational, fun component at its core. And I think that they've been able to solve for what is one of the hardest things for retailers, and that's repeatability, right? How do I get people to come back and do this over and over again? And they've been doing it with their programs that they do, or the programming and events that they do. And so, I'm going to continue to keep an eye on what they're doing, because I think that is a model for other retailers. You said the worst too, right?
Well, only if you feel so inclined.
Well,
Have
you
to.
know, unfortunately, there are so many. We might want to save that for another podcast.
Okay, we could do that. We can have one of those trashy, what is the worst and whatever. Yeah, it is. I'm encouraged actually by how many good experiences there are, and even my mission, my next mission is to figure out how do you do it in like 8,000, 10,000 stores, right?
Right.
As well as
Scalable.
that's right. How do you scale it? How do you scale an experience? And you know what? Sometimes it's as simple, it used to be, you'd walk into Walmart and there was the Walmart greeter. He said,
That's
hello,
true.
how are you? What are you looking for? And, those things that seem so simple and yet complicated these days. So anyway, you and I can continue to think about how we build these extraordinary modern customer experiences. And if anybody's going to do it, it's you. So I thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Wendy. This was wonderful. It's been great spending time with you.
Cheers for now. As Justin said very clearly, if we are going to be building a legitimate, modern, relevant customer shopper experience at retail, we have to begin with understanding our shoppers. He said I taught him that. I'm not sure that I did, but somewhere along the line, we need to understand that's where it begins. If we don't understand our shoppers and what their needs are at that moment, we cannot build a relevant experience for them that engages them and drives them back to our place. And he was very focused on the physical place and how digital is not an alternative, it's a solution to enhance the experience. He also talked about the importance of the people who deliver that experience, the people who work with us, for us, whether it's in companies or on the selling floor, that in order to engage together to build that relevant customer experience, you're not just thinking about the people who spend money with you, you're also must think about the people who work for you in that. And he talked about very passionately about values. Standing for what you believe in as a company and delivering against that. And if troubles come along the way, then standing strong for it and saying, this is who we are. We recognize who our core customers are, and we think this is a value that's important to them because we listen to them. Not such an easy road these days, but I think what Justin said from his extraordinary experiences from Disney to Trader Joe's, that ability to, whether it's a destination that people save up for or it's a store that people go every day for their groceries, that is an integral piece for building loyal, continuous engagement with shoppers every day. And that's part of what the future of retail really will look like in the coming weeks, months, and years. So that's it for me today. I'll see you in the future. Lots more to come. Stay tuned. Cheers for now.